the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100.
Hello guys, welcome back to our podcast, Ruzzarin Bros. Well, since you saw, I already started speaking in English, so very sorry for our Latin
This
friends.
is one of those episodes where we
Yes,
speak in English.
This is one of those episodes. You know, you criticize us so much, but the fact that we mix a lot of English and Spanish, so we decided to follow your instruction and stick to one language. So we're going to do a full episode in English, so you can go screw yourselves. No, just kidding. I hope you guys enjoy it. We have a very special friend today. As you know, this week we are running a very interesting event here at Casa Nomo called The Future of Work. And we had the pleasure of hosting some incredible speakers that are going to participate in this project with us. And we took some time to have some conversations with them, deep dive on the conversation, listen to their stories, their approach on this idea of the future of work. And as always, debate some critical thinking arguments and let's delve in ambiguity with different topics of conversation. So having said that, my friend Bowman, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Well, it's great to be here.
Welcome to the show, man.
Normally what we do is we give the guest a couple of minutes just to talk a little bit about his past. What did you study? What did you invested your time in? What have you worked with? Some cool projects that you have worked with? And then what you are currently working at the moment. Where is your passion? Like what drives your interest? And then we pick it up from there.
Sure, that's good. Yeah, I have a little bit of a strange past.
Those are the best.
As you saw me walk in here, I started out studying engineering, but then I always been a basketball player, so I left the U.S. to play professional basketball in Europe for many years.
Wow!
That's why I'm so tall. Well, maybe there's a causality.
The other way around.
Causality, yeah, because you're so tall. But really, you play professional basketball in Europe?
for about 10 years or so. Yeah.
Wow!
And then during that process, because I'd always been a more rather academic person growing up as well, so I did my master's and my PhD when I was in Sweden.
Uh-huh.
And met my wife in Sweden. So so then in the last 20 years I lived in the Middle East. I was the head of a science park, or the innovation director of a science park. Wow. And that was a good experience.
All over the place, man.
Yeah, the common denominator after basketball has been about innovation and entrepreneurship from a technology perspective. Links back to my starting as an engineer. But then my education moved on to technology management and economics. And now I do policy work in law and economics. So, and I like to teach. I really like, it's interesting when you're teaching, and we have an action-based way of teaching our program in Sweden that we created, where young people are learning about how to do innovation, entrepreneurship from an interdisciplinary perspective. So you have lawyers, you have engineers, you have business students, you have bio students. And they work together to learn what they don't know about the other fields, which I think is critical. You can get pretty far in life knowing what you don't know, right? Because at least then you can ask.
Yep.
So, and then we have them work on real projects. So working with trying to get technology out into the world, creating new ideas is one thing, but getting them out there and having them create impact, of course, is, that is the entrepreneurial challenge. Yeah. At the same time, with the issue that, we're here with our event later today about the future of work. So the technology that people are bringing out into the world is also having an impact on the jobs that people can have as well, right?
Yes.
And so we need people that can bring out new ideas, but those new ideas that come out also impact the work that those people do and other people do. It's interesting how technology is always improving the world as a whole, but during this improvement process, this creative destruction, we often don't talk about the destructive part as well. So we need to talk about the creative part, but we also need to talk about the destructive part, because if in the short term it is so destructive for a group of people that it creates, populism and things like that, that is completely rational for the people that feel disenfranchised.
I agree.
That they,
they don't feel represented.
They don't feel represented, and that it alters the democratic process in a way. Then these economic models that we tend to use that show how everything's going to turn out to be all right, assume that things won't go completely wrong in the short term.
Yeah.
So as I move from engineering into innovation, entrepreneurship, and into policy thinking, this future of work idea is a very central piece of this, especially as we look at how the economy grows and the distribution of how value is created in society and how we build a sustainable society going forward. At the same time, when we obviously at some point in time as a species we will become smart enough not to need to work as much as we do, and when we don't do that, And now the whole system is based on you get money from your work and the taxes are paid by that. If all of a sudden you don't need to work as much, you can't also not get paid as much. You need to get paid as much but work less.
Yes. That's
And
the
so how would we do
challenge.
this from a distributional perspective? Because we're already struggling with that in many regards.
Yeah.
And it's probably likely to become more concentrated. So we want more technology innovation, but we also have to see how society can
adapt to that
adapt
change.
to this exactly. Yeah, so that's
So-
one of my areas of interest.
Big
So,
questions.
so
big
first of all,
points.
it's extremely interesting. I think like it's always a pleasant surprise to see people with such diverse backgrounds, and it almost made me imagine. I mean, a person such as yourself, like with your depth and like with your the way you structure and you look at things and the way you think and projective thinking and engineering as a background as a basketball player. It's almost like
Yeah, it's awesome.
You guys like Bowman is huge. Like you should see him walking around the house. Like he's a very tall guy. So it's immediately evidence that you were athletic and like you were into the sport and as a professional player, which is already an achievement by itself that deserves a whole conversation. But then you see this quiet big person, a basketball player, and then suddenly he's talking about the impact of technology in the future. And like it's almost weird for me to imagine you like thinking about the 3-pointers and covering the guards, and at the same time you have like this engineering background. But then again, I think that most of the time these people with such multidisciplinary and almost contradictive interests and past experiences come up with the most interesting profiles. Because like you said, this idea of entrepreneurs developing this multidisciplinary approach to innovation, and in a way your story is very multidisciplinary in that same sense, like technology, policy making, law and engineering, athletics, and like this already gives within yourself the example of the value of multidisciplinary approach. And then I think it resonates very well with your own example of how important it is for entrepreneurs to consider the importance of this multidisciplinary thinking.
Right. I think you get old like me, you have a time to learn certain things, but very early it's good to learn at least what you don't know that's important.
Yeah.
So you can bring in other people, right? And it's hard for one person to be completely interdisciplinary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Interdisciplinarity is mostly one person being relatively good at one or two things, but knowing
It's a
what
choice.
they need other people.
He's bad at other
exactly.
things.
Yeah, you have to be. Yeah.
I relate to you. I mean, 100%. I mean, I can be called a gardener, a DJ, a fucking
Engineer.
Yeah, of course, engineer, philosopher, writer, thinker, whatever. Gamer. I mean, I do a bunch of things, and I do them at a certain good level. I mean, with all modesty, I work hard on whatever I choose, and I go. But I agree with your comment that I mean, being like the best at something, you really have to invest your whole life probably on it. So there is an upside and a downside. Remember the story about the guy that did Dilbert? You know the comic Dilbert?
Right. Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, it's a great one. So this guy is very similar to, well, in some ways it's similar to your story or to any multidisciplinary story. So he says like he has a blog, I remember his name exactly, but he has a blog and he posts ideas. And I once a friend of mine recommended, actually I think it was Giz, it was a title. He recommended to me to look at one of the articles, and he spoke about success, okay? Financial success, to be straightforward. And he said like you can either choose like being like the top 1% at one thing, which is a tough thing to do, or you can be top 10% in 3 things, and 10% is just like a rounded number. It can be top 20%. If you're top 20% in 3 things in the
3
whole
disciplines.
world, man, there's something.
That's pretty good.
And this connects very well with a phrase from a philosopher called David Hume, right? He said like the repetition of all past experiences will never generate innovation, will never generate new ideas. We need to clash ideas together. That's the only way, we need to be interdisciplinary. And
Now you can look at a horse and buggy as long as you want. You're not going to come up with the idea of a car
exactly, man, exactly.
very easily.
And just to finish the story about this guy, the guy from Dilbert, he said like, well, I'm a good drawer. I can draw, but I'm not the best drawer in the world, And then he said like, I'm a funny guy, but I'm not the funniest guy in the world. And I know about business, but I'm not the biggest entrepreneur businessman in the world. Yeah. So he made a comic, comedy about business.
Right.
And he just fucking changes the rules of the game, He innovated. And everyone knows Dilbert. It's pretty interesting.
So I'm going to try to over intellectualize the story because I think is a great example that connects very well.
Well, that's your specialty, isn't
yeah,
it?
my specialty is to take knowledge and just like
Just keep
make it insane.
Yeah,
Until it makes no more sense. Yeah, until it's completely meaningless. Yeah, let's try. Let's do our best, guys. We're gonna dwell in uncertainty and ambiguity here.
As we always do.
As we always do. So
That's how
get
conversation-
comfortable in
That's
your
right.
chair.
That's
We're
good.
gonna talk
That's
about Cthulhu and H.P. Lovecraft. No, just kidding. So like the notion is that the importance of the multidisciplinary approach. So the way I see it and the way I connect it back to the job market and the future of work is that in a way, even talents get commoditized in time.
Sure.
Right, so whatever your talent is, if you're a good drawer, if you're a good comedian, if you're a good engineer, if you're just a good engineer, regardless, your talent is going to get commoditized in time. Like as soon as you join an industry, the set of skills and talents that you have that will join this company are going to, instead of increase in value, of course they will because of your experience, you're going to acquire new knowledge, but your basic skills are going to get commoditized. Only the new skills will increase your perceived value on the market.
Well, that's the the flip side of specialization. Most economists would say that specialization, division of labor is good, but then if you become very narrow in your understanding, then that becomes obsolete.
Exactly.
That it's going to be you put a lot of effort into that, so
and then it doesn't necessarily pay off. So, and here's where it gets interesting. Like I'm going to use my story as an example. I was a designer. I was really afraid I was going to starve because I saw the business just going to shit and like so many
it's
hipster.
kind of a gig economy type.
It was a
position
gig
for a while.
exactly.
Yeah, like
it was
freelancer.
freelancing.
Yeah,
Exactly. So I was really scared. I thought I'm gonna starve. Like if I'm a designer, I'm not gonna have enough money to do the stuff that I want. I'm gonna have to work my ass off to get very very little money in return.
You thought it's only artists starve, but then you're like, shit, designers starve
a-
too. I thought
Oh, yeah.
I thought I had made the right choice here.
No, yeah, most philosophers do as well, and some musician and most athletes.
Yeah,
it-
but there are
it's
some
a
rich
tough business.
philosophers. There are some rich designers.
They are the
There are
exception.
some rich athletes as
They
well.
are the exception. They are the
The exception to the rule.
and they deserve a movie. They're not the rule. Yeah. They deserve movies like Slumdog Millionaire. They're not the case. But finishing the thought is that so I was a designer and this was weird. And at the moment I was very much interested into food. So at the moment there was no food designers. So I decided to get specialized into the relationship between design and food. And then on top of that, my wife is very much into psychology, specifically psychoanalysis. I got very interested in the topic. I started reading. I started learning a little bit of how it worked. I included that into my mindset. And then Mateus came back with a master's degree in philosophy. I got interested in philosophy as well. I started doing some research, some reading, some questioning as well. I introduced that mindset to my skill set, let's say. And then this, in a way, is my constant battle against the commoditization of my labor. And the way I see it is that multidisciplinary thinking is not necessarily you becoming a jack of all trades and a master of nothing. It's more like choosing what is going to be your vision, your passion, where you're going to dedicate your life, and complementing that vision with a set of skills and tools that will help you articulate debates with other experts.
Right.
Because I believe that multidisciplinary approach does not mean you have to know everything about every subject. No, but having at least the right level of language in order to sit down with, let's say, I suck at math. Math is probably one of my worst subjects. I'm really bad with numbers. But at least I can sit down with people when it comes to economics and business making, and I can talk about the basic principles and at least establish a conversation at the level where I need to learn and complement and ask them for help. But most people won't even go to that level. So in that sense, I think that for the future of work, people are going to have to choose. For me, is either let's say big risk, big reward of specialization and niches, where you say, I'm going to be the best endocrinologist for the relationship of the microbiome and sugar
And you're gonna
intake.
charge a fortune to,
and you're gonna beg for money, and you're gonna beg for a laboratory to hire you and finance the rest of your research.
Yeah,
and
of
do
course.
that very specific niche research.
But like if no one can do it and you can,
yes,
then
but,
you can
but
monetize it.
also there's a conditioning if there's a need for your knowledge in the market.
Of course, it's tough to get there. It's tough
Exactly.
to get
With
there.
that, there's no necessary
But I was
guarantee.
talking about services and doctors, for example.
Well, yeah, in that sense, it's slightly, but it's also slightly more commoditized, you see? Because, for example, if you're a doctor and you're an expert in coronary surgery remote done with automatic machines from US to Europe.
Yeah.
Like even if you're
There's a
doctor,
limited market as well.
you see?
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
so there's a trade-off, but I also think it's a big risk we reward in the sense that your talents can be a big payoff. And on the other side, my recommendation is that people need to start thinking about these new multidisciplinary talents that are going to keep them relevant in the market for a longer time. And in that sense, I think, like for example, everybody should speak the language of technology. Everybody should speak the language of philosophy, which I think is going to come back in a big way, like making all these hard questions that you mentioned that we're not doing at the moment. And in that sense, like I cannot recommend enough that people try to find these ways of opening up the multidisciplinary thinking brain.
Well, there's this, if you think about theories as tools, right? Most people think when they hear theory, they're like, okay, there's theory and then there's practice, but nobody does anything in practice that isn't based on a theory.
I agree.
If you don't think it's based on a theory, that just means you're not aware of it.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that
It doesn't
everything
exist.
you do in your brain is about cause and effect, right?
Yes.
Except for maybe just instinctual things. But
Which could be so fast that you don't know, but it doesn't
Right, but
necessarily
yeah.
mean it doesn't
it's
exist.
almost in evolutionary theories jammed in with heuristics, right? But but the these kind of substantial theories, when you're learning very specific skill sets, those again are this kind of division of labor where you get very good at something. But if you can move up to these more formal theories or more meta theories, that's why I read an article, that might be 10 years ago now, where someone who was a relatively successful management consultant, he said, we shouldn't be studying MBAs, we should be studying philosophy, because the basic theoretical teachings up here allow you to be more powerful.
That's
Down there.
exactly
Down
what
here.
I did.
And so as you move up in these theoretical abilities, you can deconstruct the world. So if you're very good at understanding, epistemologically how the world is, how people understand the world and how it's socially constructed, and then you can more easily move into other fields.
Yeah.
So you need, I talk about with my students being T-shaped. You should probably, if you study law, you should be pretty good at this, but then you need to have some T to the I, right? Some broader thinking.
Like a macro vision and then like the vertical approach.
Yeah, and
It's
I think
very interesting.
in the field of design thinking, which is the designer's approach to innovation, they talk a lot about this T-shaped abilities.
So where do you teach and how do you teach?
Right now I teach back and forth between California and Sweden, so it's a little bit of a commute. It's
It's a long commute. Yeah.
A bit of a commute.
but I like to teach in an action-based way, so it's usually working on real projects. So if you're going to try to understand something like innovation, you need to bring in the management, economic, legal, technical issues in a way that they're all put together. You can't teach just the class on law on this. You need to see how they all interrelate.
Yeah.
So it's very easy. Once you study law, it's very legal issues or economic issues. You understand that technology doesn't really have any meaning in society outside of the legal and economic issues. I mean, you can talk about technology purely engineering ways,
Yep.
but that's never going to be implemented in society without an understanding of the legal framework. I mean, autonomous driving.
Yeah. What does it imply?
What does it mean? When cars crash, it's not going to be people having insurance. It's going to be product liability. That little thing there could stop the whole thing from taking off.
Yeah. And
It is in many ways,
and
right?
economically, you're going to have new business models. Old companies may go away, new ones.
Markets.
So if you don't, so that's why this kind of, you can think about it as an engineer, but if you wanted to get things out in society, you need to see the much bigger, broader picture. And when you do that, like you said with your area with food, you start to see, well, I need to bring this in very early. I can't do this first and then worry about this. I have to think about it all at the same time.
It's a very interesting approach. And as you said, like what is cool about this is that laws, in a way, they're like these silent social contracts, and they get formalized in the field of law. But it's interesting because what about these new technologies that require new laws? And that's why I love your comment about reframing back to philosophy in order to understand the macro scenarios of epistemology, and then based on that, you have to think of forward in the social implications and then design these social contracts that still don't exist. Because a lot of the new technology are going to be, at the beginning, we're going to try to adapt to them based on old social contracts, but they're not necessarily the right ones.
Well, the laws are based on, usually, I mean, almost all institutions in society are based on constraints.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can let
Frameworks.
you can let people copy things for their own personal use, and say copyright issues. And if you have to copy things by writing them down, a whole book by hand, there's a bit of a problem with that being an economic issue.
Yeah.
But if you can digitize it and send it out,
Then it becomes an issue.
then all of a sudden the law has to deal with that, because before it didn't need to, because it was too difficult for it to have any meaning.
The barrier of entry was too high.
So as technology gets better and better, we cut through these barriers that allow for that remove constraints, and this causes law again is why it's always lagging, because it's always
It
based
has to
on
catch up.
catch up. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so in the short term, you're using laws that were built with other intentions.
Yeah.
And then if you want going back to theory or philosophy, you go back and what was the underlying meaning of the law when it was created on those principles? What is the current context?
But
And
it's
how
also-
do you move it over to this? It's like I had a teacher that used the term, you have to understand the text, the context, and the context in the text.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good, right?
It is,
Yeah.
and in a
That's
way,
the context and
it's
the
complicated
context.
because I think the same type of backwards thinking. It's also the condemnation of philosophy. Like many authors, many philosophers have said in one way or another. Hegel said this idea of the aurora of thinking. The only thing we can perceive is something that has already passed, and we have to understand backwards in order to project forward. And most of the times, like most of this policy making and law writing that we do with very good intentions and based on context, with positive and optimist and empathic and humane projections of the future, they can backfire as well.
Sure.
Because you never know how these things are going to adapt. Like, for example, one of the examples that I think is very latent to this discussion is the gig economy.
Right.
Like, I cannot imagine that Uber was conceived under a pervasive notion of abuse of labor and lowering the average minimum wage. I don't believe the business model was created with that intention. But the fact that people were so desperate, they ended up using the platform in a way that is almost like hacking the system and creating these sub jobs where people have to sleep on their cars and like have these horrible life conditions using a system. And then who are we? Do we need to blame the system? Do we need to re-regulate? You know, and this is complicated because the jobs were already created. Like the economy is already moving in that direction. But then again, it's so hard to foresee all these social adaptations.
Or to let it happen also. It's
Yeah,
terrible.
should you let it happen? Like, do you give this room for maneuver and then you adapt versus chaos? It's,
So the thing about
In
philosophy,
California, I think, has passed a rule or a law now,
which is
to turn the big gig economy people into more have more protections
have
of
more
At
law.
least-
full-time employment.
Yeah.
at
To
least
be able to handle this situation, especially in the United States where we don't have a lot of the social protections that are in Sweden with free education and free healthcare.
healthcare. Yeah.
And healthcare connected to your job
in a-
is very
in a way
problematic.
that philosophy in a way, so people have spoken less about philosophy, but it hasn't gone anywhere, and it's not going anywhere. Even Stephen Hawking said that like philosophy is dead. Like, dude, philosophy. Dude, shut
Stephen,
up.
come on, man.
Just get out of the way. He's
dead,
not
man.
dead.
Stephen
Really?
Hawking?
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephen Hawking's died.
Holy fuck! I didn't even know.
Man, really?
When I heard that statement, I'm like, this guy just lost. You know.
You stop paying attention to him?
Well, I didn't really follow him that much.
After
I
that?
mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, whatever.
But it depends what he meant by it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He came at it from his own perspective, right?
Yeah. But I mean, that's not the point.
Probably a little polemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
You guys might
wanted-
have crossed the line once in a while in your discussions as well.
We
At least
always-
once a day. At least once a day, yeah.
So here are 5 reasons why philosophy can never go away. Okay, philosophy is the study of knowledge. Okay, that's pretty broad. Everything involves knowledge in certain way. Yeah. Philosophy is the
So
study.
you would
of,
want to study why Stephen Hawking thinks the way that he thinks, right? So
There
you
we
would
go.
be back to it again.
You gotta
right?
use philosophy.
His comment was philosophy in itself.
That's called epistemology. You know,
Right.
the second reason is philosophy studies reality. So what is reality? What is this? How are we here? What is happening?
What is real?
Yeah, what is real? Okay, what is time? That's the metaphysics of time. So that's
Right.
metaphysics,
Right.
the second field. The third reason is because philosophy studies action. So that's ethics. What should we do? What ought we to do? What is the good or the right reason to act? You know, that's a massive field as well. Everyone has this common problem, like, what am I gonna do? And like, there's always these questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you gonna do tomorrow?
Right.
What are you doing right now? That's ethics. Okay. There's this fourth field called aesthetics, which is the study of art, study of beauty. We can learn everything we can or will learn about science or whatever, but science doesn't tell us a lot about beauty. you can put in the beauty of science, whatever. But when you're talking about a value judgment of if something is aesthetically beautiful or deeply moving, we're talking about the philosophy of art or aesthetics. And the fifth and the most powerful reason of all, it's formal logic. That's actually a field. And you can't explain formal logic, or you can't explain anything without knowing formal logic. It's a strange thing. Logic is in some ways outside of art, outside of science, outside of philosophy. It's something completely, and there's formal logic is a philosophical field. We have logicists. I don't know if I'm butchering the word, but you have ethicists, you have aestheticists, and you have metaphysicians, you have, and those five, a good way of looking at philosophy is like imagining a giant cloud, like a storm brewing with a bunch of lightning and rumble and, thunder and like a big, massive cloud. And once in a while, because of the clashes and the lightning and the thunder and the clouds, a smaller cloud forms and exits the massive cloud. And then it becomes a discipline. Okay.
Sure.
Sociology,
sociology, science. Science was called natural philosophy.
No, and I think, for example,
politics, democracy.
I think the argument, and just as Bowman mentioned, I don't think he meant it in that way, like in a pejorative way.
Of course.
Like the way I see it is that, for example, just the rise of AI requires so much philosophical background. It's insane. Like in the sense of if we cannot understand consciousness, how can we program consciousness? If we cannot understand reason and logic, how can we program reason and logic? If you cannot understand the mind, you cannot program the mind. Yeah. Like we were talking about, we don't understand how the field of vision works. This difference between digital and analog. How can you program something to simulate something you don't necessarily understand? Yeah. And then, bias. How can you program without bias? So you have to understand the mind. You have to understand subjectivity.
And definitely whether you should do it or not.
To begin with. Exactly.
And that's always a tricky one, especially because we tend as a species to do things that we can do, even if they
because
might not,
we can.
Even if we know that we might not be able to, that this could be the end of us. I think it used to be that we had a few things in the world that could end. I think we're creating exponentially more ways.
Yeah, as day goes by, we create new ways to kill ourselves.
We're going to really have to put these moral and philosophical discussions are going to have to come out to the center, because it's going to be difficult to contain something new.
I agree.
Even if people agree that it's probably not good. We're very bad at dialing down something. Especially
we've
dialed it up, to dial it back down.
I think, I agree with you. It's interesting. Like most of the time you see these catastrophe potential new technologies and you go to the people that created them, they had no idea. Like they literally had no idea. They had no foresight into the massive impact these technologies were going to have in the world. Most of the times, these inventions that you see, fission, fusion, the nuclear bomb, I think a lot of the virology, like a lot of these things are created. I'm not going to say naivety, but in narrow-mindedness, in the sense that they're fields of study where you're focused on, like, for example, I can imagine an engineer completely obsessed with the idea of splitting a particle. And he's just like in this mathematical language and in this framework of understanding engineering and physics, he doesn't think about sociology, he doesn't think about economics. Like probably the guy is already knee deep into problematic equations that you cannot delegate to him the ethical responsibility of understanding the morals of his invention.
Of course, that's a problem with science. It's neutral. Like there's a good way of putting this. Like
funding is not neutral.
That's the thing. Funding is not neutral.
And today science doesn't exist without funding.
But here's the thing. It might be an actually valid and very intellectually stimulating experiment to cross like the coronavirus with an interesting strain from a plant. That might be you can get a...
Biologically, it sounds interesting.
Exactly.
It could kill us.
But is it a good idea? Fuck no. That's a bad idea, And actually in the Second World War... there was this thing about the experiments and everyone around the world were doing experiments, even the guys in Germany, the Nazis.
You mean eugenics?
No. Different kind. I don't want to narrow it down. Just experiments generally. But if you put experiments beside a church, then there's a conflict. It's like, why are you butchering people in the name of what? And then well, it's a bad example, a church, because they have also butchered people in the name of something else, and that's ideology. But you know what I'm talking about? Science is kind of neutral. So then who are responsible or to do the right thing, And then you have all the scientists up until today, in a way, are human. So what age are they when they ask those questions that change humanity? And what age are they when they do those discoveries that change humanity? Like, it's maybe 20-year-old scientists or 27 or 30 or whatever. And then they grow old, and then they get more mature, they get more experience. And then they remember, like, maybe they're kids, and the reasons behind their actions change across time. The priorities change.
Subjectivity.
Yeah. Also with the big entrepreneurs, I'm sure that when Jeff Bezos began Amazon, he had a specific set of principles and ideas, and then he grew. Like, think about who you were 10 years ago. Your priorities. People freaking change. So then it is very hard. But I'm not saying that they shouldn't have a liability. They are they're still one individual. But then you try to nail it down, like at what moment they tried to fuck us, like,
and probably there was never a moment like that.
That's the thing.
Like, my argument is that it's like going to the gym. You don't remember the day you become fit. Since it's a process in itself.
It's gradual.
It's like one day you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I'm fitter. It's not a black and white. There's so many infinite shades of gray.
Black Mirror, right? The Netflix. Yeah, they have what Black Mirror is essentially is philosophy of technology. The philosophy of technology studies those 5 fields. So the epistemology, ethics, science, aesthetics, whatever. All of those fields. How are they gonna work across the future? In technology, they ask tough questions, right. And there's one episode, the only good episode in the last season, which was
crappy.
Shit. Yeah, it was about smithereens. It's called Smithereens. I really recommend that episode because they analyze a potential future for Twitter, but Twitter became a mega app, like in China that you have mega apps, that you have WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, PayPal. Twitter, all of those PayPal inside one app, which is very dystopic in its own essence. And then they studied and they talk to the creator of, I'm going to spoil this, I just don't care. So, so at the end, this guy says, it's like Zuckerberg. It's like, in a way, it's kind of a Facebook, Twitter kind of software. Yeah. And in the end, they ask him, dude, why did you do all this shit, man? I mean, look at all the consequences, because it's a long story. You can see it. But then he says, I didn't know I was going to do this. I was like, and then I think he even got fired or he got put out, because once it's in the bloodstream of the system, it kind of, it's not in his hands anymore. He didn't have control. So it is a very complex thing. Once you put in one of these ideas and softwares in the bloodstream of the internet, in the bloodstream of
society,
of capitalism, of a capitalist democracy, then how the hell do you stop it? As you said, we're very good at dialing up. And then you have all those that I hate, the fail fast designed, I don't know how to call them, ideologies. And they just break a bunch of people in the process, I really think the internet is not a good design. It has so many flaws. We are getting...
Well, it's too late.
We're getting hammered.
Well, it was designed, I was just at the anniversary of the first message on the internet from UCLA, the 50 year. And of course, the people there that were involved in that...
were happy.
They had... Well, no, they were critical. It was interesting.
Good.
So they weren't extremely happy on how things have moved forward. And of course, they designed a system to be very open. It wasn't designed for security, for one thing. It wasn't designed for all the things. It wasn't designed for any of the things that happen now, right? It was designed for moving, maybe even before that, to keep networks alive if there was a missile attack. And then after that, to be more about research actors interfacing with each other and talking. It wasn't... I think he mentioned something early on when someone first time tried to what was now would be called spam, send stuff out to people, and and that was
to the 100 people connected.
Yeah, like that. Like that. People are like, what's that? What are you doing?
99 people got my message.
So people, so just you could see already there that was something that they didn't think that would even be
a thing.
And of course, people didn't like it. It wasn't part of the norms, but they're not in control of the norms anymore, right? It has a life of its own. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And almost everything that we create has this double sides to it, right? I mean, Facebook on one hand allows people to communicate and
I think you
interact with each other, but it also opens up, just like freedom of speech.
Yeah.
You know, it gives you a chance to say what you think, but it also gives other people who you disagree with a chance to speak. And almost, if you believe in freedom of speech, you have to defend that other person's right.
I agree.
To say that, and that's a little bit of the tricky thing with companies like Facebook and others, because you can see that some of the things are not positive, but banning it or having Zuckerberg decide who to do, why would we give him the power to censor?
What's
right?
your,
I mean, that would be more power than he already has right now.
Yeah.
What's your point of view on this idea of net neutrality and censorship in social media?
Yeah, it would seem that net neutrality would make sense as a fundamental process. I mean, otherwise you're going to start to create different power positions that will allow for the market to be skewed. It doesn't seem like a free market would operate without net neutrality in a good way.
I agree.
So, but of course, you know, every time you put something out there, there's some people that benefit and lose. Even the healthcare system, people say, well, the healthcare system is too expensive. Okay, so which actors out there are willing to lose $1 trillion for us to reduce the cost of healthcare? Who raise your hand?
Yeah.
So there's always the, you know,
The flip
so
side.
everything. So that's why, you know, you can't really talk about economics without talking about politics.
I agree.
Which is another old way of looking
Relationship.
at political economy. Is really the way you have to look at things, because and that comes back to philosophy as well. You know, where's power? It's all about power and interests and how that is distributed in society in a
Or
way.
sustained or
So that's, you know, democracy is supposed to manage this process. And of course, if democracy struggles to operate because money is able to influence the people at the junctions points, then it doesn't function properly anymore, and then it becomes entrenched, and then people become disillusioned, and then they don't vote anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, you have people in the United States who don't like the current president but didn't vote. 92 million people didn't vote.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
I mean, there's this
It's
huge
insane.
amount of people that don't vote, and
It's insane.
so why? I mean, you could change any election with just a small fraction of those people. So that's when you hear the candidates, especially the Democratic candidates, talking about getting people out to vote.
Yeah, they
Or
need
even both sides. You know, you get more. There's
more people to
there's
vote
so
to
many
change
more
the
people
relationship.
sitting on the sideline. You know, so you can kind of convince the people that are already going to vote. But if you can get the people come in off the bench,
You could change the
and it's
result.
a huge amount of people, right?
So tell me your
So
point of view.
that's interesting, isn't it? That we would have that many people not vote, isn't it?
And I would like to hear your take on this. The way I see it is that, and I think I made this comment yesterday on dinner, is that for me, the biggest postmodern antagonism in the power struggle is not left versus right, liberal versus conservative. For me, is democracy versus capitalism. Is exactly what you said. Is this idea of power being used to manipulate people at the junction of decision making to perpetuate structures of power. But to the second part of my question,
And that's a very old concept.
it is
Yeah, I mean, this is
capitalism versus democracy.
Well, just the concept of power.
Oh yeah. The power structures, I agree.
Within the concept of modern democracy and capitalism is just another implementation of going back
a new
to
permutation
when there
of the
was
same game of power.
Of people back in the beginning of time.
I agree. But for me, what is interesting is that us, like, we were born in Brazil. Now we're currently living in Mexico. Like, we are very much influenced by what happens politically in the United States. Mexico being such a symbiote entity to the U.S.
Yeah, like we're not neighbors. We live on the same.
Yeah, we live on an extension.
Yes,
It's like the backyard. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so my question is, I've seen all these elections in the past few decades, or more than that, probably last 2 decades. They're so close, the results.
Sure.
They're so close. And in a sense, like, I think that the political narrative, it's always this political narrative of antagonism and oscillation of power. It's like the other guys were the bad guys, we're going to be the good guys. So whatever you did is wrong, whatever we promise is the good. And then, and of course, the first intention of politicians is to get power. Right. Because they tell you, well, I'll do whatever I need to get power, because with power, I can provide action and change. If I don't get power, none of my principles have value, right? Yeah. But the issue is that what happens and what worries me is that this narrative is just creating these very drastic polarization of debate, which is very ignorant, is very naive, is very superficial. Most people don't know the difference between the two sides.
Yeah.
They are creating this fake sense of antagonism and pushing people to adopt agendas they don't even like, just for the sake of simplifying the narrative. And what does it mean for a country and for so many countries?
I think that's become more efficient because of
Yes.
social media.
I agree.
Because, basically,
It's a well-oiled machine.
we're very easy to manipulate,
Super.
human beings.
Yes,
That's
we are.
why all these business models are based on advertisement. You would think we would run out of advertisement by now,
No.
but we don't because it's so effective. And if you can come up with a better way of doing it, I don't know how much better it is to like run an ad on Facebook that's targeted than run it on TV, but I'm sure it's
Oh,
hundreds or
There's
million
thousands of
sold.
times
Yeah.
better.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
because and of course, advertisement is manipulation.
Yep.
We decided that it was reasonable amount of it,
But it is.
especially when it was just, look, there's a product out here you might like, and this one is, faster than or is red, and that.
Yeah.
But now it's much more
Your
about
life and
it's not helping you to
experience.
decide something you already wanted on what you. It's not that you decided to do something and now you can pick from this or that. It's pushing you in the direction to consume.
Yep.
yeah. There's this phrase from
and that's a little bit subversive.
I
in
agree.
A way, I think.
There's this
Very
phrase,
manipulative.
There's a phrase from Goethe that was said 200 years ago. He said none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe that they are free. So that applies to so many things.
Especially today.
Especially on this, and then you have we were speaking about the Brave New World. I was it wasn't us. I was talking about the documentary. I was talking about the future of
Actually,
work.
the
and
name
stuff.
of his conference is Brave New World.
That's right.
You're kidding me, man! Amazing. I read the Brave New World Revisited, like the book of essays,
right.
and I am about to finish the novel. It's amazing, man. It's
I
amazing.
just started to reread it again because it's been a while, and I think
Yeah, it's the dark side of pleasure. It's positive conditioning.
Yeah.
The Brave New World, instead of this guy figured out a bunch of interesting things.
Yeah.
A bunch of interesting things. And it's funny because Brave New World is his most famous novel, of course,
Right.
but he had written 15 other books or stuff that we don't really talk
Pay
about.
attention to.
But this guy did so much muscle work and leg work before he wrote that.
it's like the Beatles in Germany.
Yeah. And about
You got to put
positive
in your time. You got to
Yeah.
practice.
and he figured out by studying the work of many different thinkers, psychologists.
Right.
He studied Sigmund Freud. He studied a bunch of people, and he understood that if you negatively condition a person by putting them in jail or by punishing them, eventually they're gonna go back and they're gonna do it again.
Right.
But if you positively, reinforce the good things, then they're gonna be relaxed and they're just gonna chill. They just want to relax.
And aren't we living in the age of absolute positivity?
of dopamine, of positivity?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's insane.
And of course, man, this was a comment from one of our viewers, and it's a very interesting thing he said. He said, pessimists are never going to change. I'm sorry, optimists are never going to change the world because they're fine with what it is. Only pessimists can really do something about it
Because they want something better.
because they want something better. Yeah, and I sadly I think that we are more and more getting comfortable with less and less.
We get pacified with positivity.
Yeah,
I agree.
And the problem is that our psyche, our consciousness is multiplying exponentially. Every year we're more, and every year we're going to accelerate more. And then there's,
what I think
it's tough.
one of the most dangerous aspects of this, I call it toxic positivity, is this notion that the yes we can, this yes we can ideology, which I don't fully condemn as a campaign. I understand.
It's good that you say this.
I understand.
It's better than no, we can't.
Exactly. I understand.
Everything's relative, right?
Yeah. Well,
You can never be against one thing without understanding what the alternative
but
is.
that
right?
slippery slope will take you to alternative facts.
No, I'm not saying.
Yeah, it's the issue. The issue with the yes we can is that the role of power has been changed from a permissive, perverse father figure. Is the father figure that tells you, we're gonna have to visit your grandma, and you're like, I don't want to go. Like, it's okay, son, you're free. If you don't want to go, it's okay. But just remember that your grandma loves you very much, and she's gonna feel really bad if you don't go, and she's probably gonna die soon. And is this manipulation where they delegate the decision
Sounds
to
like
you?
a personal experience.
Right? Well, yeah, I can relate. Versus the authoritative father figure that is like, get your ass off the sofa. We're gonna see grandma. Like, I don't want to go. I don't care. Get your ass up. We're gonna see grandma.
I think parenting. Yeah, parenting. Yeah, the first version is usually what you think you're going to do as a parent, and the second one is what you end up doing. Or at least you have a one, or you have a one-two. You have a 1-2 punch. You start with the first one.
Yeah.
And then you hope that will work.
Yeah.
Because you want them to kind of decide that maybe it's better to do
Well,
that.
Freud.
But if it doesn't, get your ass off the sofa. We're going.
Yeah, like
down.
I
gave you the chance.
Yeah. I gave you the option to make the right choice twice. You've made it the wrong choice twice. Get the fuck up.
Get up. Go, yeah.
So Freud said it very well. He said the job of a parent is to try not to fuck up as bad. That's the best you can aspire to do. I mean, you're gonna fuck up. The best you can do is try not to fuck up too bad. But having said that, I mean this as figures of power. And my critique to this idea of toxic positivity is that the system doesn't give you any limits anymore. It's like you can be whatever you want. You can be whatever you want, man.
Like it depends on you.
Yeah. Do you want to be the president of the America? Okay, you can be the president. Go ahead. Like there's nothing stopping you. Literally nothing. Like go kill yourself. Like do drugs, do human trafficking to get money. Everything is worth it as long as you're following your dream. And it's this notion that everything is on the table.
As long as your dream doesn't necessarily infringe on.
Well, you see, but
there's some laws.
But is this like this bullshit positivity ideology? Is this notion that
anyone can be anything?
Yeah,
that is not true.
Is this fake sense?
I agree with that comment.
It also creates a fake sense of entitlement. Because people are, and most new generations are brought up with this promise that they can be anything. And they almost expect something in return from the system that is promising they can be anything. So you told me I could be anything. Why am I nothing? And of course, it's going to create a lot of regret, a lot of resentment. And this resentment,
I think it depends a lot on what you mean by you can be anything. So I guess if it's, the world is competitive.
Yeah.
And if everyone, you have an opportunity to become a lot more things than maybe you think you can.
I agree.
Yeah, but that statement is very different from.
No, it's true, and of course, but
it
doesn't fit on a hat. You got to make it fit on the hat.
That's the issue.
So it's
marketing is the new language.
But everyone might strive to be the president, but not everyone's going to be the president, right?
Yeah. That's a fact.
And of course, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the ability to try to become something that you want isn't a result in itself.
Here's the thing.
Now, if you tell people that you're a failure because you didn't get there, as opposed to saying that did you try to do it, and because if you do good work on things, as you said, you work hard, your life will be improved.
Definitely.
Probably in ways you're not sure of, but anytime you put in the hard work, usually good things come out of that.
There's going to be a response.
So it should be more focused on the process than the outcome.
Two things.
One thing just about this. So there, I agree with what you say. The problem here that I disagree is that in the process, you might kill something very special that is volition. Okay, so you have the intellect and you have volition. They are completely different things. You can be the smartest guy in the world, but if you don't get up a bed from your bed, you can't do anything. And the problem of telling people that. It's a massive problem of telling that they can be anything they want, because that's a lie. But in a way, if you get them to do some work, they're going to grow up and they're going to get mature and they're going to understand that it's not as easy as they thought. But you give them volition, you activate the volition. I don't agree with activating volition with lies, activating people that, dude, you can be the president of the world, it doesn't exist, but you can make it exist. Like, fuck. And the guy's like, okay, and he's gonna get out of bed. He's gonna, work all of his life. And I think the director from Parasite did it beautifully. Yeah. At the end of Parasite,
what happens when you believe in this dream?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
You saw the movie?
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
you should. Don't spoil it.
I'm not gonna spoil it.
Yeah,
but
this one is really good. You should really see it.
Okay, I'm not gonna spoil what it is. Whatever. In the end, I'm not gonna spoil anything. I'm just gonna say the concept.
It's hard.
It's gonna be tough.
He's gonna spoil it. Isn't he?
No, it's not actually the end. Something happens that's like it's like a reality check. Okay, right. That's all I'm gonna say, and that's like the last 3 seconds of the movie.
and it's insane.
And it's because it's not like that.
And it's crazy because without those last 3 seconds, it will be a shitty movie. I think like, can you imagine? Well, we cannot talk about it, but
Of course, but the director, he
no,
couldn't
it
be
was a great
smart
movie.
enough.
But can you imagine if
Of
the
course,
end
and
was
he-
true?
Nah, but
It would be shit.
It's like
Of
the
course.
Sixth Sense when you
But-
like realize he.
but that's a
see,
he was
paradox.
dead. You needed that, right?
You needed
Yeah.
that. You need that twist.
That's
you need
why that guy-
like,
but that's
I mean-
what makes the whole. Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
But I mean,
it puts everything else into
a
perspective.
director that wouldn't do that ending, he wouldn't do that movie.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. But I
But I
agree.
mean, just,
Okay,
just
go.
my comment
Finish.
on volition, like, so volition is a very important thing. People can have, even people that have inherit large sums of money, if they don't have the volition, they're just gonna, their minds are gonna become shit.
Yeah.
they're
So two comments regarding this idea of what happens right now in postmodernity is that this right to become anything that you want is not perceived humanly as a right. It's a self-made imposition, and it's amplified by social media. What I mean by this is that, for example, if you're a relatively successful guy in your town, right, and you compare yourself to your friends and to your neighbors, it's like, I'm pretty successful, right? I'm doing pretty good for myself. Right. At the moment you jump into hyper globalization and hyper accessibility and hyper transparency and social media, you suddenly comparing yourself to anyone else. Yeah. So like the notion of what success means becomes very skewed. And then again, like we are in postmodernism is this very intrinsic notion of the return to self, individualization, the infinite subjectivity. There's no facts. There's subjective interpretations of facts, and but this postmodernism is complicated in very many regards. This idea of the internalization of demand of success, it's complicated, because when you become your own master, you also become your own slave, and self-demand is infinite. So it's a very intrinsic psychological commentary in the sense that if you're not happy with what you have, you're probably not going to be happy with what you want. It's true. It's a very complicated fact. It's based on hedonistic adaptation, and it's based on the principle of desire. It's intertwined and interconnected to so many psychological disciplines, and it's this notion that pleasure is so relative and happiness perception is so relative. Like you see these videos of kids in Africa that receive a soccer ball as a present, and my God, they're super happy and they're super excited, and because they have no access to the whole, let's say, pleasure, libido, macro service,
it's like a tolerance. You build up a tolerance.
Yeah, and then the other people is like,
when I get upgraded to business class, Bill Gates, he would have to cure malaria to have the same have the same feeling,
the same
trying,
joy.
Man. He's fucking trying.
But you see, and this is always my comment.
Diminishing returns.
I always make this comment, like, why is Bill Gates so obsessed with this idea of saving Africa?
Because he was very young when he created Microsoft.
He carries a burden of guilt that is not going anywhere before he dies, unless he does something mastodontic to.
I like that. I think I like what he's trying to do with the Gates Foundation.
Me too.
It probably will be.
No, I think it's admirable.
That doesn't imply that
in the long term, he'll be probably known for those activities more.
And
than
not Microsoft.
Yeah.
That's probably what he's trying to do. Like be remembered for something philanthropic. And second, to die in peace.
Plus, I think he probably believes that he was, he was a smart guy that took advantage of an opportunity, was entrepreneurial, worked hard. But he probably doesn't think that was worth maybe $100 billion.
Yeah.
And that was just how the universe came together.
Yep.
So he probably says, well, yeah, I should
pay back.
I should pay back.
Yep.
Because I can't use all this. You could call it guilt, but I think it's just a recognition. I think
I agree with you.
Buffett is the same. And of course, capitalism in the way that we have it now would function better if more people were to do that. I don't know how many people.
I disagree.
I think that I'm not saying that
philanthropy.
I'm not saying that you could probably replace
real change with philanthropy.
But I say it would be better if more people were to do these types of things, because it depends on the structure in which you operate. Like in the United States, I would like to believe that giving the government money to do things would be better. In Sweden, people believe that it works. You feel you get value for money.
Yeah.
In the United States, maybe NGOs created to solve things could be a way to go.
Better than government.
Could be. Of course, you can improve government. There's no reason why government needs to be inefficient.
I agree.
When I come into the airport and it takes me forever to get through customs,
because
I'm
of security.
Thinking, these people know the planes are coming, right? And I'm thinking now, is this your advertisement for universal health care? So it's a little.
Yeah.
So there's no reason, it's all about how things are managed and how much money is put into things. There's no reason why the government can't be very efficient.
It is an interesting point. Both sides have interesting points.
My only concern with this, and I think it was said by Mark Twain, that it's immoral to use the profits of war to cure the injured. It was not exactly those words, but it's because I read it in Spanish. I probably don't know how to translate it properly. And it's this notion that you cannot use the same sword you use to do damage to cure. And is this notion
that's
that
what you're saying about the
it's immoral
philanthropy in a way.
Exactly. And this
Well, in Sweden, you don't really have, you have philanthropy, but it's mostly old money. You don't really see charity inward. You see charity if there's a tsunami or something.
Okay.
Swedes will give charity, but
to other countries.
But they don't see charity within because they see that as a problem that needs to be fixed systemically.
By the operation, by
not
the
by
administration.
people coming out of their pockets to fill in the cracks.
Yep.
It should be handled systemically, and I think that's probably the better way. I mean, in the United States, it should be done in the way that the U.S. was set up, more locally, local, state government.
Case by case.
I think in the U.S. trying to solve things across the whole U.S., of course, things like climate change and things you need to, if you're going to try to solve something, that needs to be done
Systematically.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that can be done locally,
it's
and that's where you want
decentralized.
people. You want the sense of community, the people close to the value, to be working as much as possible. You don't want it to be too sterile.
But don't you foresee catastrophe in the privatization of philanthropy?
Well, I see problems in the socialization of philanthropy, which is if you took the money in taxes and gave it to the government to do it.
Well,
I'm not sure
universal basic shareholding, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that, it's funny, Reagan, I was reading a book recently where Reagan was very much interested in there being more employee-owned businesses. He was behind that.
Good.
So, again, creating almost like co-op type businesses.
Yeah, co-op type businesses.
And sometimes those don't scale as easily for other financial reasons, but, what's more, how do you say, liberty than letting people own the company if they want to, right?
Yeah, what they work.
So I think there's, unfortunately, as I think you said before, there's this ideological battle for some type of purity.
Yep.
If you just go back 30 years or 40 years, there was much more crossover on issues. I mean, the Republicans in the U.S. used to be the environmental people.
Can you imagine? I don't remember this.
And the Obamacare was what Mitt Romney did in Massachusetts. It was a Republic. I mean, we're really not looking at things. I have this saying that if only we were just ignorant, that would be all right. Because if we were ignorant, then we would learn and get better. But we're not. We're ideological.
It's much more.
So it's like self-inflicted ignorance.
It's much more dangerous.
It's much more dangerous.
And interest and self-interest. So the money, it puts interest, and then the ideology. If we were just ignorant, well, we have smart people that can answer these questions.
True knowledge begins with ignorance. That's the only way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Aristotle was the one to say you cannot learn that which you think you already know.
And the more you know, the more ignorant you feel. So that's not a problem. Ignorance is forgivable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's admirable.
There's a good video about the School of Life. There's a good video about precisely about the problem with philanthropy. He says, just a short comment.
I'm not sure it's a perfect solution. I'm just saying if there were more Gates Foundations, it wouldn't be awful.
Yeah, because
Because I think that at least he's doing good work and trying to make things happen and bringing people together in an organization that's probably a bit more structured than if you tried to do it through the United Nations or through some other more political structure.
I agree.
It's difficult to move.
Because there's always a second best, right? If you don't do this, what would be the other way? And
what will happen? Who will fill that void?
Right.
And I agree with you in that sense. And when I use the word guilt, and you said it's probably not necessarily the right word, I don't think it's necessary for us to negatively stigmatize guilt. Guilt has done great things for humanity.
Yeah.
I don't understand. And this for me.
Everybody probably regrets certain things.
I hope so.
That's how humans work.
We're humans. I regret things every day.
And everyone has.
Most of the times I finish sentences, I already regret what I said. I think.
Regret anything, you're a sociopath.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. In psychology, if you have no feeling of regret, you're a sociopath. But you see, this is a very interesting comment because socially we are taught about, just see the good side of things. It's like this again, the
Yeah.
toxic positivity bullshit ideology of painting everything in positive colors.
Everything is possible.
It's like no, mate, you made a mistake. It's okay. We're humans.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah,
Yes,
just said you fucked up. Great, we move on. Awesome. As soon as you admit that you made a fucked up,
Also, there's
we can
there's
progress.
a stigma in that about talking
Well,
about work again. There's a
again,
stigma
because
in companies because people
high competitivity.
demonize the mistakes. You know, people hide the mistakes and they cover their asses. That's the common slang.
Yeah.
And then like something explodes and it's way worse. I mean, and that comes from the educational system because in the educational system, people are competing to get the 100. You know, the A plus, and then when you're in the company, everyone's a team. Like we have to talk, we have to share the answers, and we have to share the knowledge.
I think this relates to, in Sweden, I always argue that one reason that Sweden works well is that if you try to look out for yourself too much, you're not going to go very far. So trying to have an opinion in your own self-interest is not necessarily going to get you far. In fact, people are probably going to realize it and it's going to hurt you, right?
That's amazing.
And then,
Here
and
it's
then
the opposite way.
And then to say something that would maybe people don't want to hear, well, you're not going to fall very far either. So it allows for this kind of institutional honesty.
That's great.
If you're in a country where if you say something out loud about the government and they're going to put you in jail,
You're fucked. Yeah.
that's the extreme, right? But we all live in a certain environment where we're worried about what we would say and how it would impact what we do. And there was a joke about, if you wanted to stop terrorism, give them mortgages. Right. So when people get a mortgage and they get responsibilities, and then they would say, well, and then they're at work and thinking, well, that's not right. But if I say something, what could happen? And so if you have a situation where people are more stable, there's less downside to being honest and open.
It's true.
Then you're going to get people to be more honest and open, which then makes everything better for everyone else. It's like a prisoner's dilemma where everyone is trying to manage their own thing, and all we're doing is hurting ourselves collectively.
Pulling everybody down.
Right. So this fact that you would have leaders who don't need to be leaders, someone in Congress who can say that I don't agree with this, and if I don't get elected again because of that, doesn't matter. We have to have more people like that
that stand for something really. And not only wants to get forward. I agree.
With the right values, with the bravery.
I think we're going to move back in that direction, but I think we have to go in a little bit southerly direction before we move back to this northerly direction.
So my friend, I really appreciate the time and the conversation. It was really, really interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm very thankful for the conversation. I hope this is the first of many conversations we can have. We can find other channels, other ways, and maybe
I want to see you guys fight more with each other next time.
Yeah. Well,
you got along together.
Yeah.
I want to have to jump in, take this seat. So there's a break in the programming, and then all of a sudden I'm in the middle seat and you're over here.
You guys
That's how I
want
what
it.
he's talking about.
That's how I want it next time.
Well, we are fervent defenders of debate.
Yeah, so we would fight about
just like you said.
More debates.
I defend your right of free speech to the point where I defend your right to be wrong.
That's right.
That way.
That's right.
But then again, thank you so much.
Yeah,
and
thank
we have
you.
a small metaphorical gift.
All right, that's good. It's an antidote.
Yeah, it's a
for today's experience.
It's a metaphorical antidote. Snake oil.
It's snake oil.
So it's
that's perfect.
it's an idea.
So get me stopped at the border, right?
Yeah.
Strip searched.
It took
You have to
2
explain
months.
Where are the rest of your bottles? Where do you have the rest of the bottles?
I just need one. Yeah,
It
this
was
will
a-
cure everything. Yeah.
It was a complex concoction. It took me 2 months to get all the ingredients, do it right, and there it is. So essentially, what it is, it's a metaphor about the complexity of the world. Okay, there is no simple answer. There's no magic pill. There's no snake oil.
Right.
And we give this to each one of our guests because also philosophy doesn't have all the answer. Philosophy has a limit. You can become intoxicated with philosophy, and maybe people won't have the best life that they could. There are many other things.
You can overanalyze things. It's not necessarily a happy life, is it?
I agree.
And the same way that oversimplifying is not always the best answer as well.
Exactly. And then again, literature doesn't have all the answers, but they have good answers. Family doesn't have all the answers, but they have good answers. Reflection, introspection has good answers, but not all the answers. Friends have good answers, but not all the answers. Essentially is to embrace complexity and not buying into snake oil that someone can deceive people, and not selling snake oil, like selling the cure for everything. There's no such thing. I mean, the world is a complex place, and we have to embrace the multidisciplinarity of it.
The way this is a very good constant reminder, and this is a very personal experience, is that we had a guest some time ago that triggered me this question. When was the last time that I really changed my mind about a fundamental thought that I had? You know, and how often and how sane it is for us to question our fundamental notions of how the world functions and how reality functions. And I think in that sense that is the spirit that Hegel expected us to have in dialectics, in this notion that we need to be this force of change as imminent critique and understand the macro vision of reality in a way, but understand that we understand it backwards and we need to challenge it in order to move forward.
Yeah, it's intellectual honesty, and it's the most beautiful thing about philosophy. The problem is that these days it's very tough. People are kind of ashamed to say, fuck, yeah, actually you're right, I was wrong, you know? And it's a shame. And I learned that with my master's in philosophy, like there, and they said like, have a flexible mind, you know? There's so many arguments and so many counter arguments that when you look at them directly, maybe we are being deceived.
Well, that's why I think the entrepreneurial mindset is positive, because you expect that you're wrong, and you're quickly trying to figure that out and find the right thing, and then you're willing to admit. So it's fun to bring entrepreneurs back and listen to them talk about all the mistakes they made, because that helps other people to realize that, well, you're not going to get where you want to go unless you make some mistakes and you're open-minded enough to accept that.
That's a great closing thought. So again, thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Good to have you. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're done.